You don't belong here. Officer Derek Braun's hand slammed down on the bar table, sending martini glasses crashing to the floor. Shattered glass sprayed across expensive heels as two black women sat frozen, their FBI credentials hidden in purses just inches away. 20 patrons pulled out phones, capturing what they thought was just another abuse of power. Nobody knew they were filming the beginning of the largest police corruption scandal in Georgia history. The Platinum Lounge wasn't just a bar. It was a statement. Perched on the 42nd floor of the Grandmont Tower in downtown Atlanta, it represented everything exclusive about old Southern money trying to dress itself in modern sophistication. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city's glittering skyline. Crystal chandeliers imported from Italy cast golden light across polished marble floors that probably cost more per square foot than most people's annual salaries. The bar itself was a work of art, a curved masterpiece of backlit onyx stretching 30 feet, lined with top-shelf liquors that started at $50 per pour. Leather booths and deep burgundy formed intimate spaces along the windows. Modern art that nobody understood but everyone pretended to appreciate, decorated walls painted in sophisticated grays and creams. The dress code was enforced ruthlessly. No sneakers. No athletic wear. No jeans unless they cost more than $300, and even then, the doorman made judgment calls. The cover charge alone, $75 per person, kept out most of Atlanta's population. This was where corporate executives celebrated deals. Where old money families maintained their social circles. Where politicians held unofficial meetings that never appeared on official schedules. Where the city's elite came to see and be seen, to network and negotiate, to maintain the invisible boundaries that separated us from them. Friday night at 9:47 p.m., the Platinum Lounge hummed with its usual crowd. Investment bankers loosened expensive ties after 12-hour days. Trust fund heirs pretended their family money was somehow earned through merit. Lawyers who defended corporations laughed over bourbon that cost more than their paralegals' weekly paychecks. The soundtrack was tasteful jazz, just loud enough to create ambience without preventing conversation. At a corner table near the western windows, two women sat who immediately stood out from the demographic norm. Maya and Zara Bennett, sisters with secrets. Maya Lynette Bennett, 34 years old, sat with the posture of someone trained to assess every room she entered. Her navy blazer was perfectly tailored, worn over a silk blouse the color of champagne. Her natural hair was styled in elegant shoulder-length locks, pulled back with a subtle gold clip that caught the light. Small diamond studs in her ears, a gift from her mother when she graduated from Quantico. A simple watch on her left wrist that looked expensive but wasn't, because Maya had learned early that flash drew the wrong kind of attention. Her face carried the kind of beauty that intimidated some people: high cheekbones, deep brown eyes that missed nothing, full lips that smiled easily but could deliver devastating cross-examinations when necessary. But it was her presence that really set her apart. The calm confidence of someone who'd faced down armed drug traffickers, negotiated with hostage-takers, and walked into situations that would make most people freeze. Maya had just finished her second week as senior special agent at the FBI's Atlanta field office. The promotion represented 15 years of exemplary service. She'd started as a field agent in Miami, working drug interdiction cases that put her face-to-face with cartel enforcers. Then Chicago, where she'd specialized in organized crime. 3 years in Washington, D.C. working counterintelligence. Now Atlanta, leading a team of 12 agents investigating public corruption. Her personnel file included multiple commendations. Successful undercover operations that dismantled trafficking networks. Testimony that put away defendants everyone said were untouchable. A reputation among criminals as someone you didn't lie to, because she always knew. Among her fellow agents, she was respected as tough but fair, demanding but supportive, someone who led from the front and never asked anyone to do what she wouldn't do herself. Tonight, though, Maya wasn't Special Agent Bennett. She was just Maya, out with her little sister, trying to pretend for a few hours that she had a normal life. Zara Nicole Bennett, 31 years old, sat across from her sister with the kind of contained energy that suggested a brilliant mind constantly working 3 steps ahead. Her burgundy dress was elegant but edgy, sleeveless, hitting just above the knee, paired with heels that added 3 inches to her 5'6" frame. Her hair was cut in a sharp, asymmetrical bob that framed features similar to Maya's but softer somehow, more approachable. Zara was the cerebral sister, the one who'd always gotten straight A's without trying, who'd graduated summa cum laude from Spelman College before earning her master's degree in international relations from Georgetown. She spoke 3 languages fluently, English, Spanish, and Arabic, and could read financial documents in 2 others. She joined the FBI 7 years ago as an intelligence analyst, quickly specializing in counterterrorism financial tracking. While Maya kicked down doors and faced physical danger, Zara hunted terrorists through their money trails. She could trace funds through shell corporations across 6 countries, spot patterns in banking transactions that revealed operational planning, and connect financial dots that nobody else saw. Her office in the FBI's counterterrorism division was legendary among colleagues, 3 large monitors displaying financial networks, walls covered with flowcharts that looked like abstract art to outsiders but told stories of criminal enterprises to trained eyes. She'd helped disrupt 4 major terrorist financing networks, prevented 2 domestic attacks by tracking suspicious fund transfers, and provided intelligence that led to arrests in 7 countries. But Zara's superpower wasn't just analytical brilliance. It was her photographic memory. She could recall conversations word for word months later. Recognize faces she'd seen once in passing years ago. Reconstruct entire documents from brief glimpses. It made her invaluable in investigations and absolutely lethal in interrogations. Tonight, she'd taken off the analyst hat and was just Zara, little sister, best friend, the person Maya could actually be honest with about how exhausting it was to be a black woman in federal law enforcement, constantly proving herself, constantly watching colleagues get promoted faster for doing less, constantly aware that any mistake would be magnified while excellence was expected as baseline. The sisters didn't see each other enough. Maya's field work and Zara's analyst schedules rarely aligned. Their parents in Savannah constantly complained that both daughters were married to their jobs. So when calendars finally matched and neither had a crisis demanding attention, they'd made plans for Friday night at a nice bar, good drinks, and the kind of conversation only sisters who truly understood each other could have. To making it despite everything they threw at us, Maya raised her martini glass, dirty, extra olives, exactly how she liked it. To making them uncomfortable just by existing in spaces they wish we wouldn't, Zara clinked her glass, cosmopolitan, because she liked drinks that didn't taste like alcohol even though she could hold her liquor better than most men she knew. They'd already been there for 45 minutes. Caught up on family gossip, their mother's new obsession with genealogy, their father's retirement plans that changed every week, their cousin's drama that was too complicated to explain to outsiders. Talked about work in the vague terms they'd learned to use, never sharing classified details but giving each other enough to understand the stress. Laughed about dating disasters and the particular challenge of finding partners who could handle 2 women who carried guns and investigated criminals for a living. Neither sister noticed Officer Derek Braun watching them from the bar. Officer Derek Braun, Legacy and Prejudice. Derek William Braun wasn't technically on duty, but he never really stopped being a cop. 39 years old, 17 years with the Atlanta Police Department, currently assigned to the Midtown Precinct with a specialty in vice enforcement. He wore his badge the way some men wore wedding rings, as a fundamental part of his identity. Derek stood 6'2" with the build of someone who'd been athletic in high school and still hit the gym regularly, though his midsection had started showing the effects of too many beers and desk work. His blonde hair was cut military short. His face had the weathered look of someone who spent time outdoors, with blue eyes that could turn cold in an instant. Tonight he wore jeans, a polo shirt, and a leather jacket, but his badge and gun were prominently displayed on his belt. Even off-duty, Derek made sure people knew what he was. The Braun family had worn the badge for 3 generations. Derek's grandfather had been a beat cop in the 1950s and 60s, during the era when segregation was law and police enforced it with enthusiasm. His father had risen to lieutenant, serving during the 70s and 80s when Atlanta's demographics shifted and old power structures fought desperately to maintain control. Derek had grown up on stories of the good old days when cops were respected, when criminals feared consequences, when neighborhoods knew their place and stayed there. Derek had joined the force at 22, right out of college, where he'd majored in criminal justice and minored in resentment toward affirmative action policies that he believed gave undeserved advantages to unqualified candidates. His 17 years on the job had reinforced every prejudice his family had passed down. He'd received multiple complaints over the years: excessive force allegations, racial profiling accusations, inappropriate conduct reports. Each complaint had been investigated by colleagues who shared his worldview, resulting in exonerations and reassignments rather than consequences. His personnel file was a testament to a system that protected its own. Derek saw himself as one of the good guys, someone willing to do what needed to be done to maintain order and standards. He believed he could spot criminals just by looking at them. Believed certain neighborhoods bred certain behaviors. Believed that the real racism was reverse racism, that diversity initiatives lowered standards, that political correctness prevented honest policing. And when he saw two black women in designer clothes at the Platinum Lounge, every assumption in his worldview activated automatically. They didn't belong. That was his immediate thought. This wasn't their kind of place. They were either escorts here to meet clients, or they'd gotten lucky somehow, probably affirmative action jobs that paid more than they deserved, spending money they hadn't earned on luxury they hadn't worked for. Someone needed to remind them of boundaries. Someone needed to maintain standards. Someone needed to send a message. Derek signaled to his partner. Officer Ryan Mitchell, following the wrong leader. Ryan James Mitchell was 28 years old and 4 years into his law enforcement career. Younger than Derek, less experienced, still trying to prove himself worthy of the badge his training officer wore with such confidence. Ryan had grown up in suburban Atlanta, in a middle-class family that believed in law and order, respect for authority, and the importance of hard work. He'd played football in high school, not good enough for college scholarships but solid enough to learn about teamwork and hierarchy. After a few aimless years working retail and construction, he'd decided police work offered structure, purpose, and respect. The academy had been challenging but manageable. Ryan discovered he was good at following procedures, maintaining equipment, filing reports properly. He wasn't the most creative thinker, but he was reliable. Show him the rules and he'd follow them. Give him an order and he'd execute it. Derek Braun had been assigned as his field training officer, and Ryan had latched onto him like a puppy with a new owner. Derek was everything Ryan thought a cop should be: confident, experienced, unafraid to make tough calls. Derek told him the academy taught textbook procedures, but real police work required instincts that only came from experience. Instincts that told you who was a threat before they acted. Who belonged and who didn't. Who to watch and who to trust. Ryan had absorbed Derek's worldview without questioning it. When Derek said certain neighborhoods were dangerous, Ryan believed him. When Derek said you could tell criminals by how they dressed, talked, moved, Ryan accepted it as wisdom. When Derek said that political correctness was ruining effective policing, Ryan nodded along. Ryan had his own doubts sometimes, moments when Derek's actions seemed excessive, when stops felt unjustified, when arrests looked questionable. But Derek always had explanations that made sense in the moment. And Ryan wanted to be a good cop, which meant trusting experienced officers who knew better than he did. Tonight, when Derek told him to follow, Ryan followed. The confrontation begins. Derek approached the sisters' table with deliberate swagger. His body language announced authority before his mouth opened. Ryan followed 2 steps behind, trying to mirror Derek's confidence but mostly just looking uncomfortable. "Evening, ladies." Derek's voice carried across the quiet jazz atmosphere, loud enough that nearby tables stopped their conversations. His tone managed to sound polite while dripping with condescension. "Can I see some identification?" Maya looked up slowly. Her martini glass was halfway to her lips, olives suspended in clear liquid. She took one more sip before setting it down with controlled precision. Her expression remained completely neutral, but her posture shifted in ways only someone trained to read body language would notice. Shoulders squared slightly. Weight balanced evenly on both feet despite sitting. Hands visible on the table surface. Eyes moving from Derek to Ryan and back, calculating threat levels, estimating response times, identifying exits. 15 years of training activating automatically. Is there a problem, officer? Maya's voice was calm, professional, with just a hint of South Georgia warmth from her Savannah childhood. Just routine verification. Derek's smile didn't reach his eyes. This is a private establishment. We need to confirm your members here. The statement was complete fabrication. The Platinum Lounge didn't have memberships, just a cover charge and a dress code. Derek was inventing procedure to justify harassment. Zara set down her Cosmopolitan with the same deliberate care her sister had shown. Her photographic memory was already recording every detail. Derek's badge number, visible on his belt. The time, 9:52 p.m. according to the bar's digital clock. The faces turning to watch, she'd remember every single one if needed later. We're paying customers, Zara said evenly. Just like everyone else here. That's what we're verifying. Derek moved closer, physically imposing himself into their space. Identification. Now. Around them, the atmosphere changed. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned with the synchronization of spectators at a tennis match. Phones emerged from pockets, from purses, from jacket pockets. The modern reflex, something interesting is happening, better record it. At the bar, a woman in a Chanel suit whispered to her husband. At the nearest booth, two men in expensive watches paused their business discussion to watch. By the windows, a bachelorette party stopped celebrating to stare. 20 phones. 20 different angles. 20 potential witnesses and 20 pieces of evidence being created in real time. Maya reached for her purse slowly, telegraphing every movement. This was another thing her training had drilled into her: how to interact with law enforcement when you were armed, how to avoid sudden movements that could be misinterpreted as threats, how to stay alive in situations that could turn deadly in seconds. Her purse contained several items: wallet with her driver's license, her FBI credentials in a leather case, her service weapon, a Glock 19 she'd qualified expert with for 12 consecutive years, pepper spray, handcuffs, her personal phone, and her work phone that connected her to the entire Atlanta field office. She could end this confrontation immediately. Pull out the FBI credentials. Say 2 words, federal agent. Watch Derek's face go pale as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. But something stopped her. Maya had seen this pattern too many times. Watched it happen to friends, colleagues, strangers who looked like her. The assumptions. The suspicion. The immediate presumption of guilt, of not belonging, of being a problem that needed managing. She'd watched a fellow agent get stopped 3 times in 1 month in his own neighborhood. Watched a friend who was a federal prosecutor get asked to leave a restaurant because someone complained she was threatening. Watched talented people endure humiliation after humiliation because their presence in certain spaces challenged assumptions about who belonged there. And she'd watched what happened when people pulled rank. The dynamic shifted from racism to authority conflict, but the underlying prejudice never got addressed. The officer got reprimanded maybe, but learned nothing except to be more careful about who he targeted. The system continued functioning exactly as designed. So Maya made a calculated decision. She pulled out her driver's license. Just her regular Georgia identification. Not her FBI credentials. Not yet. Derek examined the license with exaggerated scrutiny, holding it up to the light as if checking for forgery. Maya Lynette Bennett. 2847, Peachtree Road. This address current? Yes. What do you do for work, Ms. Bennett? The emphasis on Ms. was subtle but deliberate, a small linguistic weapon suggesting she was unmarried and therefore somehow less legitimate. I work for the federal government. Derek's eyebrows rose in theatrical skepticism. Federal government. Doing what, exactly? Administrative work. Maya's face remained completely neutral. Her breathing was controlled. Her hands were relaxed on the table. She gave Derek nothing to react to, no emotion to exploit, no weakness to attack. Zara handed over her identification without being asked, reading the situation and matching her sister's strategy. The Bennett sisters had developed this approach over years of similar encounters. Stay calm. Give them nothing to use against you. Document everything mentally. Wait for the right moment. Ryan Mitchell shifted his weight uncomfortably behind Derek. Something felt wrong about this interaction, but he couldn't articulate what. These women were well-dressed, polite, calm. They provided identification without argument. They weren't doing anything wrong. But Derek was his training officer. Derek had 17 years of experience. Derek had explained during their many patrol hours that sometimes you couldn't explain police instincts, you just developed a sense for trouble, for people who didn't belong, for situations that needed intervention before they escalated. So Ryan stayed quiet and let Derek continue. Federal government work. Derek repeated Maya's words slowly, letting skepticism drip from every syllable. Must be nice. Our tax dollars paying for you to drink expensive cocktails in places like this. The comment landed like a slap. Not physical but meant to sting, to remind them of their supposed place in the social hierarchy. At nearby tables, reactions varied. Some people looked uncomfortable. Others nodded slightly, agreeing with the sentiment. A few pulled out phones to record or text friends about the drama unfolding. The woman in Chanel whispered again to her husband, "I knew something was off about them." The businessmen at the booth exchanged knowing looks that said, "Finally, someone's addressing this." The bachelorette party filmed openly now, one woman providing commentary, "This is crazy, y'all. Cops just confronted these women for no reason." Maya's hands remained absolutely still on the table. But Zara felt her sister's leg tense slightly beside her under the table, the physical tell that meant Maya was calculating, running scenarios, deciding how far to let this escalate before responding. "We've provided identification," Zara said, her voice even and professional. "Is there anything else you need?" Derek leaned down, placing both palms flat on their table. The movement brought his face level with theirs, invading their personal space in a calculated display of dominance. His breath smelled like the bourbon he'd been drinking before deciding to harass them. "What I need," Derek said, his voice dropping to a tone that was somehow both quieter and more menacing, "is for you to understand something." He paused, making sure nearby tables could hear. "This isn't the kind of place for people like you. There are plenty of bars in other neighborhoods where you'd be more comfortable. Places more suited to your background." The words hung in the poisonous air. 20 phones captured them from 20 angles. Someone gasped audibly. The bartender looked away, suddenly very interested in cleaning a glass that was already clean. Maya's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, a micro-expression that lasted maybe half a second before her training reasserted control. Zara's fingers curled slightly around her cosmopolitan glass, the stem creaking under pressure that didn't quite break it. But neither sister spoke. Not yet. Derek straightened up, satisfied with the impact of his performance. He'd established dominance, put them in their place, send a message to everyone watching about who had power in this situation. "I'm going to have to ask you ladies to finish your drinks and leave," Derek announced loudly enough for the entire bar to hear. "We've received complaints about your behavior." "What behavior?" Maya's voice remained steady, controlled, giving away nothing. "We've been sitting here talking quietly for the past 45 minutes. Loud voices. Disturbing other patrons. Multiple complaints." Derek was creating his narrative in real time, building a case file from pure fiction. "That's absolutely not true," Zara interjected. "We haven't raised our voices once." "Are you calling me a liar?" Derek's hand moved to his belt, not quite touching his weapon but drawing attention to it, a casual threat wrapped in body language that every person of color in America had learned to recognize and fear. The gesture was deliberate. A reminder of power dynamics. A subtle suggestion that noncompliance could escalate into something much worse. Ryan's hand moved toward his own belt in unconscious mimicry, then stopped. Something about this really didn't feel right. These women were calm, articulate, clearly educated. They hadn't done anything threatening. But Derek was his training officer, and challenging him publicly would undermine authority and potentially endanger both their careers. So Ryan stayed silent, even as his conscience whispered that this was wrong. The manager's complicity. From behind the bar, Stephen Walsh had been watching the confrontation with growing concern. Not concern for justice or fairness, but concern for his establishment's liability and reputation. Stephen was 53 years old, thin and nervous, with receding gray hair and the permanent worried expression of someone who'd spent 20 years in hospitality management. He'd worked at the Platinum Lounge since it opened, rising from server to assistant manager to head manager. He understood his job was protecting the establishment's exclusive atmosphere and keeping problems away from the ownership group. The ownership group that included several major donors to the police department's fraternal organizations. Stephen had seen situations like this before. Complaints about certain customers. Officers who happened to be drinking at the bar when those complaints arose. Management decisions that prioritized the comfort of regular high-paying clientele over the rights of anyone who made that clientele uncomfortable. He'd learned early that justice and business rarely aligned, and business paid his mortgage. Stephen approached the table with practiced apologetic body language that conveyed sympathy without actually committing to any real support. "Is there a problem here, officers?" "Just handling a disturbance," Derek said smoothly, his tone shifting to professional camaraderie. "These women were asked to leave, and they're refusing to comply." Stephen looked at Maya and Zara with an expression he'd perfected over 2 decades, the face of someone who personally feels bad about what he's about to do, but whose hands are tied by circumstances beyond his control. "Ladies, I'm going to have to ask you to settle your tab and exit the premises." "We haven't done anything wrong," Maya said, her voice still controlled but with an edge of steel entering it. "I don't want any trouble," Stephen replied, which was management speak for "I don't want trouble with the police." He looked at Derek and Ryan, then back at the sisters. "Please. Just leave peacefully and we can avoid escalating this situation." The betrayal was complete. 2 women who'd done nothing wrong, accused of crimes they hadn't committed, asked to leave a public establishment they had every right to patronize, all while surrounded by witnesses who would remember them as problems rather than victims. The fundamental injustice of it all hung in the air like smoke from a fire nobody wanted to acknowledge was burning. Maya reached for her purse again. Her fingers brushed against her FBI credentials. The leather case felt familiar, reassuring. She could pull it out right now. End this humiliation. Watch Derek's smug expression crumble into panic as he realized he'd just harassed a federal agent with the authority to investigate him and every corrupt cop he'd ever worked with. But Zara caught her sister's eye. A silent conversation passed between them, the kind only siblings who'd grown up together, protected each other, understood each other on molecular levels could have. "Not yet," Zara's look said. "Let them think they won. Document everything. Build the case properly." Maya's fingers moved past the FBI credentials and pulled out her credit card instead. "We'll close our tab," she said quietly. Derek smiled, a victor's expression that came from crushing someone he believed was weaker. "Smart choice. See? Cooperation works so much better than attitude." The bartender processed the payment quickly, avoiding eye contact. The receipt printed out with a mechanical whir that sounded unnaturally loud in the silent bar. Maya signed it with perfectly controlled handwriting. No trembling. No visible anger. Just mechanical precision that came from 15 years of maintaining composure in situations that would make most people crack. The tip line remained empty. No reward for complicity. The sisters gathered their belongings with unhurried dignity. Purses. Phones. Jackets. Every movement deliberate, refusing to appear rushed or defeated even as they complied with an unjust demand. They stood together, shoulders back, heads high. Maya was 5'8" without heels, in heels she matched Derek's eye level. Zara's 3-inch heels brought her to 5'9". They looked Derek directly in the eyes, a small act of defiance that said, "You haven't broken us." As they walked toward the elevator, Derek called after them, his voice carrying across the now silent bar like a pronouncement meant for everyone present. "Remember what I said about staying in your own neighborhoods. Places like this aren't for people like you." The elevator doors opened. Maya and Zara stepped inside. Turned around. Faced the bar full of witnesses who would later claim they didn't remember much, or that the women must have done something to provoke such a response, or that police officers wouldn't act without good reason. The doors slid closed on their calm faces, hiding whatever emotions finally broke through their professional composure. In the elevator descending 42 floors, the sisters didn't speak for 30 seconds. Just breathed. Processed. Let the adrenaline that had been suppressed for survival finally flow through their systems. Then Maya spoke, her voice very quiet, every face. Every word. Every detail. Already memorized, Zara replied. Including the 20 phones that recorded everything. Good. Maya's expression shifted from victim to something else entirely, something predatory. Because Derek Braun just made the biggest mistake of his career. "They have no idea who we are," Zara said. "Not yet." Maya pulled out her FBI credentials, looking at the badge that she'd kept hidden. "But they're going to learn." The viral beginning. By the time the Bennett sisters reached the ground floor of the Grandmont Tower, the video footage was already uploading to social media platforms. Multiple witnesses posted their recordings with captions like, "Cops just kicked out 2 black women from Platinum Lounge for literally no reason #racial profiling. This is insane. They were just sitting there #Platinum Lounge shame. White cops harassing black women at upscale bar. Welcome to 2024 #justice needed." The #Platinum Lounge shocker started appearing in posts. Then #Platinum Lounge racism. Views climbed from hundreds to thousands within minutes. But the people sharing the videos had no idea what they'd actually captured. They thought they'd filmed routine police harassment, terrible, unjust, but ultimately a story that would trend for a day before being replaced by the next outrage. They didn't know they'd filmed the opening scene of a federal corruption investigation. They didn't know those helpless victims had the authority to subpoena everyone in that bar. They didn't know that Maya Bennett had spent the last 3 months building a case on police corruption in Atlanta that needed just one more local example to justify expanding the investigation. They didn't know that Zara Bennett's photographic memory had recorded every detail that would later be used in federal testimony. And they absolutely didn't know that Officer Derek Braun, who was currently celebrating his successful harassment with another bourbon at the bar, had just committed multiple federal civil rights violations on camera. The viral video was just the beginning. The real story, the one that would end careers, send officers to prison, and force an entire department to confront its systematic racism, was about to unfold. But nobody in the Platinum Lounge knew that yet. Derek finished his bourbon and ordered another, satisfied with how he'd handled the situation. Stephen Walsh went back to managing the bar, relieved the disturbance had been resolved without damaging the establishment's reputation. Ryan Mitchell tried to ignore the uncomfortable feeling in his gut that he'd just participated in something very wrong. The patrons returned to their conversations and expensive drinks, the entertainment over. And 42 floors below, in the lobby of the Grandmont Tower, 2 FBI agents stood looking at their phones as video footage of their own humiliation spread across the internet. Maya's jaw was set in an expression her teen would recognize, the look she got right before bringing down an entire criminal organization. Zara was already taking notes on her phone, documenting every detail that would matter later. "Tomorrow morning," Maya said quietly, "I'm opening a formal investigation." "On what grounds?" Zara asked. Maya looked up at the tower, at the Platinum Lounge 42 floors above where Derek Braun thought he'd won. Civil rights violations. Abuse of authority under color of law. Conspiracy to deprive citizens of constitutional rights. And that's just the beginning. This could get complicated, Zara warned. Going after cops. It's about to get very complicated, Maya agreed. For them. The sisters walked toward Maya's car, a sensible Honda that gave no hint of her federal agent status. Behind them, the Grandmont Tower rose into the Atlanta night sky, housing a bar full of people who had no idea they'd just participated in the opening act of a drama that would dominate national headlines. The question wasn't whether justice would come. The question was whether anyone in that bar would survive what was about to happen when two FBI agents decided to stop being invisible and start being investigators. Derek Braun had made a fatal assumption, that two black women in a bar were powerless. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. Monday morning, 8 a.m. Maya Bennett walked into the FBI's Atlanta field office with purpose. Her team of 12 agents assembled in the conference room, confusion evident on their faces. Emergency meetings meant something big. "We're opening a federal civil rights investigation," Maya announced, pulling up the viral video on the screen. "These are the victims." Zara entered with 3 banker's boxes. Financial records. Derek Braun has received payments from the Platinum Lounge ownership group for the past 4 years. 17 similar incidents documented. All minority patrons. All removed without cause. The team went silent, understanding dawning. Derek thought he was harassing powerless civilians, Maya continued. He activated a federal investigation instead. Agent Chen, pull every arrest record Braun's touched in 5 years. Agent Thompson, interview every person he's ever detained. Agent Rodriguez, subpoena the Platinum Lounge's security footage and financial records. "What about the viral video?" Agent Lewis asked. "Let it spread. Public pressure helps." Maya's expression hardened. "Derek Braun wanted us to know our place. Time to show him his." The walls close in. By Tuesday afternoon, Derek's world was crumbling. FBI agents appeared at the Platinum Lounge with warrants. Stephen Walsh's hands shook as he handed over documents showing systematic payments to officers who managed undesirable clientele. Ryan Mitchell was called for federal questioning. In the interview room, he faced Maya, though he didn't know she was one of the women from Friday night. "Officer Mitchell, tell me about the Platinum Lounge incident." Ryan's carefully rehearsed story collapsed when Maya played footage from multiple angles. Derek said they were causing problems. They were sitting quietly. "You participated in federal civil rights violations." Maya leaned forward. "Here's what happens next. You cooperate fully, testify against Derek and everyone involved, and we recommend minimal charges. Or you go down with him. You have 10 seconds to decide." Ryan talked for 3 hours. His testimony revealed a network of corruption, officers receiving payments from exclusive establishments to remove minority patrons, quotas for stops in certain neighborhoods, a culture where racism was policy, not aberration. The public reveal. Wednesday's press conference made national news. FBI Director Williams stood beside Maya and Zara at federal courthouse steps. 5 days ago, Officer Derek Braun violated the civil rights of 2 federal agents, Williams announced. What he didn't know was that Senior Special Agent Maya Bennett and intelligence analyst Zara Bennett were building a corruption case that his actions perfectly exemplified. Cameras exploded with flashes. Reporters shouted questions. Maya stepped to the microphone. "For 3 months, we've investigated systematic civil rights violations in Atlanta law enforcement. Officer Braun's harassment provided the final piece, a clear example of institutionalized racism captured on video from 20 angles." She paused, letting that sink in. "We've identified 47 similar incidents. 12 officers receiving payments. For establishments systematically excluding minorities. This isn't about one bad cop. It's about a system designed to keep people in their supposed place." Zara added, "Every person who filmed Friday night thinking they captured routine harassment actually documented federal crimes. Those videos are now evidence in prosecution of Derek Braun, Stephen Walsh, and 11 other defendants." The reckoning. Derek was arrested Thursday morning at his home. Federal charges, conspiracy to deprive civil rights, bribery, extortion, fraud. His bail was set at $500,000, more than his family could raise. In his cell, Derek finally understood. The women he'd humiliated weren't powerless. They were federal agents who'd turned his racism into his own prosecution. Stephen Walsh flipped immediately, providing documents showing the Platinum Lounge ownership paid officers $2,000 monthly to maintain their exclusive atmosphere by removing minorities. Ryan Mitchell accepted a plea deal, 3 years probation in exchange for testimony against Derek in the systemic corruption. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Maya testified about not just her own harassment, but patterns revealed through investigation. Zara's photographic memory reconstructed conversations and details that devastated the defense. The jury deliberated 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Derek received 8 years federal prison. His police pension was revoked. His family's 3-generation legacy ended in disgrace. The transformation. The investigation expanded nationally. The Department of Justice launched reviews in 12 cities. Police departments implemented mandatory bias training. Exclusive establishments faced civil rights audits. Maya and Zara became symbols of fighting back strategically. Their story, staying calm, documenting everything, using the system against itself, was taught in FBI training. The Platinum Lounge closed permanently. The Grandmont Tower converted that space into a civil rights museum, featuring the Bennett sisters' story. 6 months later, Maya stood before congressional committee testimony about systematic police reform. Change happens when victims have power, she testified. Derek Braun thought our blackness made us powerless. Our badges proved otherwise. The movement. The Bennett sisters launched Know Your Rights programs nationwide, teaching communities to document harassment, understand legal protections, and fight injustice strategically. Their message resonated: you don't have to be FBI agents to demand dignity. You just need courage, documentation, and refusal to accept injustice as normal. Thousands shared their own stories using #KnowYourPlace, reclaiming Derek's hateful words as a movement slogan. Derek rotted in federal prison, his racism finally having consequences. The Platinum Lounge became a cautionary tale. And 2 sisters who'd been told they didn't belong proved that justice belongs to everyone willing to fight for it. Final message. Maya looked into the camera during her final interview. Derek wanted us to know our place. He was right, our place is ensuring people like him face consequences. Your place is standing up when you witness injustice. Your place is refusing to be silent. Comment below, what will you do next time you witness discrimination? Subscribe for more justice stories. Share this with someone who needs to know their power. Because here's the truth, you might not have an FBI badge. But you have a voice, a camera, and rights that nobody can take away. Derek learned that lesson the hard way. Don't let the next Derek in your life go unchallenged. Your turn starts now.